the guys that really impacted the evolution of the project, being involved at the early beginning, later many years, still around the project, but maybe not that visible in terms of contributions. So I'm starting from this side. We have Dorham Sisalem, which was the head of the department at the Fraunhofer Focus, where SIP Express router was developed starting with 2001. So he was the boss of the group. The next one is Andrei Pelinescu-Onciu, which is the first developer of the SIP Express router. So if you look at the history of the commits, he did the first one, and he's the one that designed most of the core components, has heavily contributed to transaction management, TLS implementation currently. So it's still probably having most of the code in what is now Kamailio, but he was working with SIP Express router over the time. We have eggs and potatoes, so if you don't like our config file, now it's time in the back. But now, many thanks to Andrei, because he is really one of the best contributor to the project, and the powerful framework that you get now with SIP Express router Kamailio, it's one of his babies, to say, with config file and all the optimization for scalability and so on. And then, we have Jiri Kutan, which had also a lot of contribution, from what I remember, mainly with TM module, SL module, and many of the initial modules back in 2001.
Actually, he has a lot of to-dos in the source code.
But he may be better remembered as the guy running across the world promoting SIP Express router back in early 2000, mid 2000, and even later helping with bringing together Kamailio and SIP Express router source tree in the same repository. And actually we have another major contributor here. It's Miklos, somewhere in the Miklos. It's there. He was the author of the permission module and also asynchronous framework, which many of you love right now, and this config framework.
Cool. Really good.
You can. So now I prepare a couple of questions myself, and then I give let's say the floor to you for tough questions. So I'm starting here with Dorham. They don't know anything, so it's more about how you see now the market comparing today with what was there. Do you think the same kind of approach, like from research, spending time there, and then trying to bring to commercial, is still, it's better now comparing with that moment, given all these fights with telecom to adopt open source, or you would prefer now to go more into like closed source? What do you think would be a good approach now, open source or closed source for real-time communication?
No comment. I'm an Oracle worker, so I can't say anything about this.
No, you are invited as a former researcher here.
Sure. Well, actually, the reason why we went open source was very simple. We didn't have any marketing or salespeople. So it was very obvious that if we want to get the code out there, we had to make it open source. We had to do it for free. And I've been now involved in a couple of EU projects, which actually, by the way, one of the major motivations for Andrei to work on this. He didn't want to work on those research projects. And I'm seeing that even like the guidelines are now, if you don't make it open source, then you will not get funding.
Okay, so big thanks to Andy. Okay, then I'm moving to Andrei, and my question, as he's a technical guy, would be, would you start the same kind of framework mainly from the point of view of, let's say, configuration file, writing from scratch a highly optimized scripting language, or you think today there are some other alternatives, maybe Lua or, let's say, Python, that you would prefer for a scripting language for building routing blocks?
No, I would use the same approach. I mean, I would come up with my own configuration file. Lua, it's really cool, but from a performance point of view, it cannot keep up with handwritten configuration and all the stuff. What maybe I would do different, I would do the language a little bit different, and there are some implementation details, like, I don't know, adding variables, which was really complicated. You had to edit a lot of stuff. But apart from that, I would go from the same approach.
Okay, because
I remember a lot of debates by variables. You would have been evil. That was your argument.
You have.
Didn't you say that variables would be evil and we would never have them once?
I think it was more about AVPs, which I still think were a big mistake.
Okay. So
Just to bring it in broader context, I think we owe Andrei the drive for simplicity and style. Without that, I think SER, with the code it has, it would have collapsed after several years. But it was Andrei's drive for simplicity and sanity and style. And for the style, that's just that's one of those things you cannot buy with MasterCard. And that was obviously a few times conflict with my desire for features. So that was the notorious clash, sanity versus features. And I'm pleased to learn that the variables are missing.
okay, then Jay, my question for you would be more from the point of view of like protocol. Do you think SIP was a good choice for real-time communications and going to the open standards? Let's put it more from the open standards point of view, because as you see now, a lot of islands about WhatsApp, Skype, they try not to federate and so on. What's your take in like open protocols versus optimized closed protocols?
I think sort of like just in one.
It's on at the back. Yeah.
So I think I'm still having periodically this conversation, and I think just in one sentence, once the soup is finished and it's good enough, you're not going to throw it out. That being part of the cooking process, you certainly have to have some reservations what should have been done differently. I think probably the biggest enemy of having made the SIP protocol better was the IETF religion. There was a lot of good religious approaches and ideas in the IETF, but the really problematic part began when the IETF leadership started the IPv6 religion. Sorry, Ola. But the argument was like, oh, don't worry about these firewalls and nets. We are going to have IPv6 next year, or maybe over next year, or maybe 3 years later. But we are not going to do hacks, and forget just net and firewalls. They will go away. And I'm by character, I'm more pragmatic than religious. And I just was not able to bear with it, and probably others were not able to bear with it either, and that's how the session border controllers happened. That was the answer to SIP design protocol imperfections. There have been a few more. Probably the biggest single cause why some things went wrong was PST and backwards compatibility. Backwards compatibility makes things complicated. If you ever tried to debug forking with early media in combination with some loops and spirals, you probably know what I'm speaking about. That's when the protocol is not simple at all and things begin to be really nasty. There were a couple of little things like the invite transaction. I think it should have been subscribe notify because that would have left the transaction model much easier. There should have been some unique identifiers. You know, the initial religion was we are liberal in receiving. We are going to take any crap which is going to come on us. The result was that we were calculating transaction ID from 5 header fields, which could have been formatted 10 different ways, and it never matched. If transaction ID was just a single number, things would have been easier. That was later patched with the branch ID in R3261. So some things were fixed later, have become better. I think of a really historical significance, what was really a big gap, that was all of the net traversal. And that market was actually impatient because like in 2004, everybody began to run voice over IP, at least here in Germany. Freenet started at Avalanche by then. And net traversal just had to be made workable. And the SBCs vendors make their business and IPOs out of it. So I think in a nutshell, I think there should have been a little bit less religion. But otherwise, it's there today. It's the new SSA technology. It connects trunks, it connects residential users. It could have been a little bit nicer aesthetically, like Skype did it. Skype didn't go through this design by committee like the IETF did, in fact. And Skype, if I compare to Skype, has made many nicer, better choices, like choice of codecs. But in the end, it's really the scale that matters, and I think on that, SIP has just established itself as the successor protocol for almost any telephone, I think. There were a couple of hype stuff, like messaging, presence. I think that should have been forgotten from conception on, but it was not, so it will be a longer death. But for telephony, I think SIP has come out of it pretty well, even with like well-known limitations and things which could have been done better, but they were not.
Okay, so now just for everyone and quick, if you remember a funny, interesting story that happened either from point of view of coding or that you want to share. It's not that every of you have to do, but if you have one in mind and you want to share it right now, short story, funny, I don't know, some CPIT in the past that where you did some crazy stuff, SIP interoperability events or other conferences, or I don't know, if it was like a corner situation for the project, I don't know, with this, maybe Dorham remembers.
If we didn't have fun stories, we are 15 years younger and therefore horribly serious.
Okay.
Well, actually, probably the funniest thing is that we promised Andre he will only work half a year on the project.
Sort of happened because when we were asking if he's finished, 3 days before delivery, he still had nothing.
Okay.
And he just didn't realize it took 6 years then.
Yeah. Okay, so now just to see if you have questions. I see all is serious about everything, so prepare for maybe something tough. But before I ask more questions, anyone from audience wants to ask something? No one? You are scared, right?
Who of you knows the source code?
Sorry, I haven't seen. Which one?
It's really a technical question, but I may ask a tough question. You said
Yeah, that's important.
Well, I have a
That
question.
doesn't refer to the transaction module, does it? That would really scare me.
You can come this side also.
I have a question about memory management. My understanding is that Kamailio is doing its own memory management. Can you tell us a bit about the reasoning behind that? Would you do it different today?
The reason behind that was performance. So my goals, at least at the beginning, was to make it portable, and performance was the second goal. And we discovered during some profiling, I think that was Irji did, a lot of time was wasted in the system memory manager. So that's why we came up with optimized version for the kind of memory allocation patterns that were used at that time. I don't know, in the meantime, things change a bit, but that's why we did it. And I don't know today if the latest memory allocation are fast enough, but if they would pose a problem, I would do the same thing. I mean, I would write my own memory allocation, which actually is not such a complicated thing.
Okay, to give an update from the current state of the project also to Andre and Jiri Dorham, we have now an option to select the memory manager at startup. So practically with the command line parameter, you can say this fast malloc, quick malloc, and then some guys from Orange, France, Camille is not here, but Federico is from the same team, and Alfonso, they added a new memory manager, which is using TLSF algorithm. I don't remember exactly the expansion of this abbreviation, which is not as performant as fast malloc, but it's better in the cases you work with a lot of large chunks of memory. And I probably remember that the last chunks are on the same slot of the hash table. The thing is that they use TLS a lot, so they have like 100,000 of connection, and if it's like a network outage, then all that slot is getting busy with, we do also merging, sometimes joining the packets. So Camilo Dut from Orange France had it like 1 year ago, or yeah, more or less, that new memory manager. And then I added on top the option to select, so I put it like an API to register at startup which memory manager you want, which is quite useful, especially tuning on or changing to use this Q-malloc, which is optimized or not optimized, design it for better troubleshooting. Okay, other tough questions? Here, okay.
Would you go for a separate shared memory, process memory, and multi-process instead of? So would you still go for a separate shared memory allocator and package memory allocator and multi-process instead of multi-threaded, and with the separate file descriptors as hassle as a result of that? Or would you already reconsider as concerning what GCC, for example, nowadays support? And yeah, it was not the same so many years ago.
So Andre under fire.
Yeah, this is a tough question. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, the between the multi-process approach and the multi-threading approach, each one has its advantages and disadvantages. The major advantage of the process approach is isolation. And I think this way of having to think before what kind of memory you want to allocate, shared or local, it's a win in this case. The multi-threading approach would be sharing file descriptor, which is otherwise quite complicated. I mean, you will have to go through queues, and we do a lot of stuff in TCP to minimize the performance impact of passing file descriptor. We cache them and stuff like that. That would be a big advantage for threading if you are doing a lot of file descriptor, if you need to share a lot of file descriptor. On the other hand, you could do that on Linux even with normal processes if you go from using fork to directly using the clone system call, and you could have shared file descriptor. That's one of the things that I wanted to do, but I never got to doing it in SIP router.
Okay, so now coming back with a question that I don't want to miss to all of them, maybe special Dorham or Jay. Did you expect that this project is going to last for more than a few years? As in research, a lot, and also with focus, a lot of projects are born and die before actually getting to any useful, deployment.
Sure. From day one, we knew this will be standing here in 15 years. What's your expectation? Actually, we didn't really think about that. When we started the work, it was more about we want to have something interesting to do, something useful, and something to keep Andre happy.
So Andre,
And
so
I think we managed to do that. And we're all sick and tired of just doing some research projects which will die after the end of the project. So we were looking for something which will last longer. And we had to do it as well, because at that time, I think Jirji bought something like 50,000 euro Cisco equipment, which didn't work.
well,
And so we had to actually build something to actually make our voice over IP lab work. Now, whether it would last 15 years, I think after like a couple of years, we knew this is not something that's going to die soon.
okay.
But we didn't really know it in the first day, and we didn't plan it as well. It's something that we had to do and we wanted to do.
Then for jury, the question a bit with a nuance, not dying, but then in terms of impact, because now a lot of, and you see here a lot of people, you expected that it's gonna catch up the market and be useful for many companies over the years, or you expected that, okay, we'll be used in research, we'll keep using for other researching projects, real-time prototyping?
Yes, sure. I wanted that. I had no idea where it's going to end up, but that I was trying to place it everywhere. And I remember the initial excitement, like the first users, they were really, especially in the initial chaos period of time, that was not like today, more or less proliferated telcos, ISPs, whoever, but it was coming from all around, and we actually found out that it was used on board of Boeing planes, because there was one of the very initial technologies for internet everywhere, including on the aircraft. That was Boeing Connection, which went later in bankruptcy just because the technology was too heavyweight and too expensive to operate. But we were there, and so it was able to make phone calls from Boeing aircraft, and that was very exciting. Actually, I spoke to the guys a few times, and we learned a lot from them in how rigid they are in their deployments. They don't have not even IP addresses are different on two different places. Everything must be the same, so they can run regression tests and make sure everything is traceable, auditable, retestable, and so on. We were SER was running on some U.S. research submarine. And so we were, it was being adapted by some schools by then with support from Internet 2, which is sort of like, I would say, universities, US universities buying club. So it was popping up everywhere, and we were not really certain what's going to be mainstream, even though what was our educated guess that it would be the ISPs trying to take the telco business out of the incumbents turned out to be actually quite correct. But we were trying to do the best. How much it would be, we didn't have a crystal ball to look in. But to me, it's like beyond any expectations. Even my father is using voice over IP, and he doesn't have a clue that he's doing that. That's satisfactory.
Okay, other questions from the audience? Because I have Stefan from 1&1, 1&1.
Would you make Kamailio multi-threader rather than multi-processing if it were to redesign?
Okay. You missed the question. It was before.
Oh, sorry.
Summarize, no.
Okay. To summarize, no.
I mean, I would tend to make it all still multi-process. But I'm not so hard against multi-threading now. So.
Okay, soft answer. Then, because this is important actually, and good that I haven't forgotten. We know that first years of development were not really under the pressure of the production. Do you think these roots in research contributed to the success of the project? As we know, many of the commercial products, they have to deliver yesterday, right? A quick question for you, whoever wants to take it.
Yeah.
Answer yes.
Yes, Dorham?
I would say yes. I mean, we had a couple of great guys to work on it. We were able to fund them, and I think if we had a startup who wanted to build this stuff, we would have probably had invested like a couple of millions before we had the first product, and not knowing where this is going to, or even if it's worth doing, and we wouldn't have done it.
Right. So thanks again to the European Research Network and German research networks, Fraunhofer, that funded. And at some point, I got also my salary from there, which was good times. Yeah, as they summarize it, we are a bit younger and more serious, taking coding. Questions? If not, some ending words and maybe wishes and whatever you think is going to happen to this real-time communication. We'll see it in IoT, in car-to-car communication, whatsoever. You haven't been here in the morning. Professor Margedans was here, and he presented the future.
Well, in that case, we can just shut up.
But yeah, a closing remark, what you could be about the past, the future, what you think about this real-time communication, where you want to go, how you expect to evolve, what's missing, it should be more on privacy, security, or do you think scalability of SIP Express router, it's still enough, or will you focus more on like this performance, or will you focus more on usability?
So I personally would focus on performance because that's the find I think interesting and measurable. And there is still place for making it more scalable.
Happiness, it's also, we can smile. Measurable. Now maybe Jiri, which is a bit more non-technical focus, what would be your take? Performance?
So on the technical, actually I think the performance topic is a really good one. It's for some reason underappreciated, but the reason why SER has been successful is largely its performance, and it's we know the traffic till today. I'm still running the iptel.org SIP site, and I know that every SIP user every day generates gigabytes of SIP traffic, and that we got every day like packet rates from single attackers, which are like 40 password guessing attacks every single second. And the performance is not here to deal with the couple of subscribers. You can just scale it up, but often it's just to deal with unpredictable situations like attacks or misconfigured peering site, this and that. And if the performance is not good enough, you can speak of Moore's law and some other marketing yada yada, but it's not going to keep the service stable. The performance is really important. So that's one thing. Technically, I think we are in the maturity age with SER. I think, in my opinion, the most useful part is really trying to run it from clouds reliably, and in a way that's well integrated with the components which help to run it, like monitoring, troubleshooting. All of these things which allow you to run a service smoothly and at perfection. So that's on the technical side what I think is in. Performance continues to be, and this service integration in clouds is a good up-to-date topic. On the spiritual side, I think it's been a really I think that was a good question with if it has done us better that we didn't have any customers initially. Yeah, I think that it was a good creative time, and I think the SER design confirms it till today that this free buffer time was extremely useful. And so I think that if people keep contributing and this way that they do extensions or other components that integrate with SER for personal satisfaction and out of common sense, and I would put it in comparison to some silly product manager or design by committee approaches. If people keep doing let me be a little bit pathetic, by heart rather than by product management guidebook, I think it will continue to be fantastic software.
Okay, Dorham?
So,
Will
well-
you choose another team to build? You selected people. Okay.
no comments on that.
Okay.
Well, I guess the SER project had what takes for a successful open source project. Had the great developers, great people who are looking afterwards. But I think the major thing that differentiates between a open source project which keeps on surviving like 15 years and longer and others is whether it's actually solving a problem that somebody is needing. And if I look here, I think we have like, 100 people who believe that this is solving their problems, otherwise they wouldn't be here. And as long as the SER is solving the current problem, which is, I would say high performance, which is again underappreciated, and the use case, then it will be successful. And as long as there are people behind it, like Mr. Mirla here, who are pushing it and making sure that it doesn't die, then I'm confident we will see each other here in 5 years again.
Or diehards, at least. Okay, thank you. And yeah, there are over 150 people here, actually. We're full room. So many thanks. Again, these guys had really relevant impact, if not crucial impact in getting to where we are now. Because if the roots were not solid, then I'm sure we haven't been successful for so many years. Big thanks for coming over, and maybe they will be around if you have more questions. Thank you, Dorham, Andrei, Jiri, and looking forward to see you around.